Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Legacy Speaks. As always, I am super duper excited to be able to introduce to you another amazing clinician. We have Dr. Kristy Christopher Holloway, and she's a licensed professional counselor here in the state of Georgia, and she's also the founder and director of the New Vision Counseling Center. So please help me welcome Dr. Kristy Christopher Holloway.
Yay! Hi everybody!
Oh, yay! So I know that I just introduced you, but can you please let the people know your clinical background as well as your specialties?
Absolutely. So as far as like education and all that good stuff,
whatever you want to share.
Okay. Well, my clinical background, I am, as you just said, a licensed professional counselor here in Georgia. I'm also a national certified counselor, a distance credentialed counselor, and what that means is I can offer telehealth or teletherapy services, and an approved clinical supervisor. I received my bachelor's from LSU, my master's from Georgia State, and my doctorate degree in counselor education and supervision from Argosy University. And my clinical specialty areas, I've had experience in a whole lot of different areas, but my primary focus right now is working with women who experience maternal mental health issues, so perinatal or postpartum mood and anxiety disorders like postpartum depression and anxiety, psychosis, as well as infertility trauma, birth trauma, and pregnancy and infant loss. So that's a lot.
It is a lot, but it's simply amazing. It's kind of rare to find clinicians who pretty much focus on that niche.
Absolutely,
and
definitely.
As a new clinician, I'm learning about niching down and things of that
Yes.
nature. And so that's exactly why I created this series, to be able to talk to clinicians such as yourself to get a better understanding of what people are niching down into.
Yeah.
And so what made you move into this particular direction?
Absolutely. So my doctoral research actually focused on the mental health experiences of African American women who have been diagnosed with infertility, but also identify as religious or spiritual. So you have like this mental health stigma, and then this infertility stigma,
Yes.
right? And you're religious or spiritual, so you're trying to like figure all of this stuff out.
Yes.
So that's what my research focused on, and then having personal experiences with infertility and trauma. So that's kind of how I kind of got to that that specialty area, I guess. Yeah. And then also working with a lot of clients who were experiencing, unfortunately, infertility as well as like pregnancy loss and losing infants. So yeah.
And can you talk about that experience with working with those particular clients or those that particular demographic, particularly because of the fact that when you think of womanhood, you think of being able to birth or being able to create life. And so when somebody is going through something as traumatic as that, when they're not able to produce a child, or through miscarriage and things of that nature, you're kind of dealing with guilt and shame.
Right.
So how do you kind of work the therapeutic process when it comes to just targeting that particular population?
Right. Well, you're right. Here in the United States, we have this pronatalist society. So, everybody assumes that all women want to be moms, give birth, have babies, right? And have multiple babies and all this other stuff. And so, typically, a woman they may say, well, how old are you? Do you have any kids? Or how many kids do you have? Or you get married. I always say you can barely jump the broom before somebody is saying, when y'all gonna have babies? Where are my babies? Where are my grandbabies? And so, just typically in our society in general, that's what the assumption is, that women want babies. And that's not always the case, but a lot of times that is the case. And then a lot of times as well, many women do connect or associate their womanhood with motherhood. So being able to reproduce, that's what sets us apart from men, for the most part. So there's this connection that if I can't have children, or I can't have children naturally, or my body's not normal, right? That I'm not a woman, or I'm less than a woman. And so, they may think, we're told growing up, don't have sex or you're gonna get pregnant,
right?
Like, that's it. You have sex, you're gonna get pregnant. And when that doesn't happen, when you are ready to get pregnant, that can be very difficult for a lot of women. And so you're right, that guilt and that shame comes in, like, what's wrong with me?
Right.
I feel bad for my partner. I'm putting them through this. I feel bad for my family, because a lot of folks do come from families who are like, no, we need grandchildren. Like, this is it. You know, we got to carry this lineage, just depending on their culture. And so sometimes that can be a lot. And, you know, even the terminology like miscarriage, you know, just think of that.
Yeah.
Your body is doing something wrong. It is right? It is malfunctioning.
Yes.
So even a lot of, you know, barren, the terminology that we put around this with women promotes further shame, further stigma when it comes to infertility. So, you know, that's just kind of what it looks like. And, you know, helping women to navigate that, because, you know, that intersection of womanhood and motherhood, and because I primarily work with women of color, then the intersection adding into that, you know, your ethnic origin or your cultural identity, right? So being able to like really navigate what that looks like. Who were you before you became a mom, or before you decided to start trying to become a mom? Who will you be once you become a mom? You know, your roles may change, but who you fundamentally are, will that change?
Right.
And so kind of helping women connect that and get that identity piece together through that, as well as working through the grief of infertility, because infertility does produce a lot of grief, and a lot of times people don't know that or understand that. And it's not the same type of grief maybe from losing a parent or losing a pet, right? Or you know, retiring. It's not the same type of grief, but it's also very traumatic.
Right.
So it's very important to me that this is an area that I work in.
Definitely. There's so many different little tidbits that you dropped.
I know, so
and I'm like,
this is my passion, so this go on for 3 hours.
Yes. But to go back to the word barren, because obviously as somebody who's a Christian and very spiritual, that's a word that we hear a lot throughout the Bible. And when you're barren, it means that you're not being able to produce fruit. And so how can you, I guess, reimagine or redirect that word, or try to find a way for women to kind of view that word in a different way?
Absolutely. Well, you know, I'm a very cognitive behavioral therapist. So what I do is help clients to connect how their thoughts and their feelings are connected to their actions and their behavior. So how everything is like connected. And you're right, that's the terminology. For if you're spiritual or religious and you read the Bible, that's what it says, right? And there's several stories of women who were barren, right, in the Bible. And so a lot of times folks are like looking to that and trying to hold on to, I'm going to be like Hannah, right? Sarah and Abraham, like I'm going to do all of this, right? But there are also women in there who did not reproduce, right? And so trying to kind of like help clients look at that from their frame of, how do you interpret this? Because the Bible does say be fruitful and multiply, right? And a lot of times people take that very literal. They think the only fruit is the fruit of the womb, right? And the Bible also says that children are a gift from God. So this is how like all of this stuff gets caught up, because if you're literally interpreting that like, well, am I not good enough to receive this gift? Am I praying hard enough? Is my faith not good enough? Am I being punished? Why did God make my womb empty and barren? So a lot of times I don't have them try to change their beliefs, right? It's more of how can you use this and what you see, because if your religious or spiritual foundation is very important to you, and that's going to help you in our counseling time, in our time together, I'm going to see how can we use this to kind of uplift you maybe, or how can you be present in this season and still hold out hope that maybe, you know, your time will come, whereas folks will say, you know, in God's timing. So, you know, helping them to kind of understand the narrative of how they are interpreting that, and how we can still acknowledge what's going on now, but move through it so that we can be prepared for what may happen in the future.
Right. And I love how you kind of recenter and refocus on the actual client and making sure that they are, you know, self-actualizing, and making sure that they're learning how to be more accepting and self-loving of the self. And then do you often bring in the partner within the therapeutic process, or do you process with the partner, particularly when it comes to miscarriages? Because oftentimes we only are focusing on the mother and the grief and the loss associated with the mom.
Absolutely.
But we totally forget about the dad.
Absolutely. So one of the things my therapist told me several years ago was infertility happens to the couple, right? And not just the woman. And so a lot of times though, even if the issue of infertility is due to the male, maybe low sperm count, no sperm, whatever it may be, it's usually when you gonna have babies, when you gonna get that man babies, and all the while we looking like it's different, you know. So the burden still goes to the woman for whatever reason, right? And the woman may know this, but she'll even still take on this burden. So when I am working with a client, a woman that's experiencing this, I will see if they want their partner to be in, because too, a lot of times the partner is trying to be strong for the woman, the person that's experiencing the infertility, and they don't really get a chance to grieve. They don't really get a chance to say how they feel. You know, the woman may be resentful. So, or even in a miscarriage, you know, she may be thinking, is he going to leave me? This was his, and so also this was his child too. And everybody grieves differently. So you may be outwardly expressing, right? You may be mourning and showing, where he may have an internal expression. So he may go to work more often. He may say, I'm going to watch TV, and to you it may feel like he's checking out and doesn't care and isn't grieving, but that may be their way. So I do, as much as possible, bring the couple in and try to, you know, talk with the couple about their experience and what's going on, and hopefully opening up that dialogue and that communication. So again, she may not be thinking, well, he doesn't care, or she, if it's a same-sex partnership or relationship, that other person doesn't care. That may not necessarily be the case. They may not just be showing it the way you do. So being able to have them kind of dialogue and talk about what that looks like.
Opening up the floodgates of communication, I think that's extremely important, particularly as a couple, because like you said, sometimes somebody's internalizing it differently in one way, and then the other partner is just, kind of either wanting to push it away or just not want to deal with it at all.
And I mean, grief is different. A lot of times, if we know the stages of grief, the first one is, denial. Right? And then anger. And so you may be in the anger or the bargaining or the depression phase, and they may still be in denial. And so they may not be connecting the same way, right? Like everybody grieves differently. They may be still in anger and they're like, and you may be in depression. And so you're maybe now internalizing they're angry at you, and they may be simply angry at this situation in the experience.
I think this whole topic, this entire issue has just been amazing, particularly with the timing of everything. With Michelle Obama opening up about her miscarriages.
Hey, First Lady.
As well as Beyonce and having to, have help. And then a lot of people are moving towards surrogacy and things of that nature. So it's amazing to see how the culture has transitioned to finding alternative methods of having children, and then also saying, hey, you're not in this alone.
Absolutely. In African American culture, in our culture, a lot of times, that's where we have this, other mothering. So, that's auntie, or that's the neighbor down the street, but they take you in. And so that's how a lot of times women were fulfilling that maternal need, right? Or that maternal instinct or that maternal desire. They may not have been able to have children, but they are the best auntie ever, or they are the best godmom ever. And maybe they did not, know about surrogacy. Surrogacy wasn't an option. Egg donation, because in the Black community, a lot of times folks are not, just due to historical traumas and medical mistreatments, right? We ain't putting all that stuff out there. So it's not as many African American or Black egg donors or sperm donors, right? And so these just weren't options. And so I'm so glad to know that they are options now. Hopefully they will be options for folks who aren't rich and have a huge platform, right? Because you know, a lot of those that want to have babies may not be able to afford to go do IVF like Mrs. Obama did, right? Yes. Or afford a surrogate. And so what that basically means is, you know, with Gabrielle Union, right? Yes. So they just had their precious baby and used the surrogate, and that's where, and I don't know if it was her eggs and his sperm, but they put them together, fertilized it, had an embryo, and put it in someone else. Well, that can be expensive. You got to harvest eggs, right? You got to get sperm. You got to do all this stuff. Yes. And so, but I'm so thankful, I guess, to see that these major people who have platforms, who are everyday people like us, right? But they have these platforms where they can say, like you said, you are not alone, and hey, even though I have all of this, what looks like going on for me, my true desire was to be a mom, and this is what I had to do. So it can kind of reduce a lot of the stigma behind it. And when I found out, you know, about Michelle Obama's need for IVF, I was like, oh my goodness. Like, and not like, yay, did you have to do that? Because again, this is very traumatizing. It's a lot of grief, and she experienced a miscarriage, and she talked about that. But just like, yo, she's talking about IVF, like on this national platform that this major black woman that was in the White House used, you know what I'm saying? So I was like, come through.
I was like, come through too. Because, you know, it normalizes it. And you're looking at this figure, she's so powerful and just so amazing, and she has this perfect life. And you get to learn just all the idiosyncrasies and just all of the mishaps that a person kind of just goes through. And I just was just so grateful for the fact that she was just able to say, hey, me too.
Yes. And I grieved, and I suffered this loss. And me and the President of the United States, you know, was out in that same type clinic that I was in or someone else was in. So yes.
And I'm really glad that you were able to address the socioeconomic status of it, because it does cost money.
Oh, it's super expensive. So, it's ridiculously expensive.
It is. And so how do you work with the client who can't afford that particular treatment?
So, you know, there are several options. And I can go into a whole diatribe, I think, of why, you know, infertility treatments are so expensive, and how it's basically a separation of the have and have-nots. Those who can afford it can have babies, and those who can't. And so, you know, just again, but I won't go into all of that because that'll add 3 more hours. But you're right, everybody cannot afford that. And so the first thing that I do is really with the client that is in that situation and really does desire to be a mom but cannot afford expensive medical treatments, or can't afford to take off work. You know, a lot of insurance companies don't cover infertility treatments. Only as of today, 15 states mandate that insurance companies have some type of coverage. And that can look like, hey, you know, before we pay for IVF, you have to get 6 IUIs and failed IUIs, or you know, so that's again traumatic. If I have to do this 6 times and knowing it's gonna fail because my medical doctor has already said it's not gonna work. You know, but anywho, so women who really can't afford it, or who can't afford to take off work and keep going to the clinic and getting monitored and, you know, taking the medications and things, the first thing that I'll do is really talk with them about what is their desire and how does motherhood need to look for them. So they may say, you know, I just want to be a mom. That can be through IVF, that can be through surrogacy, that can be through adoption, that can be through maybe volunteering. Again, that other mothering piece. If I can, you know, work in a place, maybe fostering. And so they may know the child may only be there very temporarily, but it's still, you know, helping them. So I really talk about, let's navigate this and what this needs to look like for you. And then from there we put out options. Some say, no, I biologically need to have a child to feel like I am a real mother, because society, you know, plays this, you know, pits folks against each other. And if you had a C-section versus natural, you didn't birth. If you had IVF for no reason. Like if you had infertility, you won't have natural kids. And I'm like, as opposed to unnatural, like aliens, what are we saying here? But some may really feel like that. And Usually I will see if there's some way I can help them get like a medical workup and see if that's even an option. You know, they may have blocked tubes. They may have something going on with their uterus. They may have an incompetent cervix where they will always miscarry. And so I have to know the reality of what their situation is before I say, you know, will you and your husband try, or you and your partner try, or, you know, or things like that. Because I don't want to set them up. So let's get some medical stuff. Maybe if I can co-coordinate with your doctor or have a release of information or something like that, so we can see, so I can know from a mental health standpoint what this looks like for you medically, so I can help you navigate that. And then, so it may just be a matter that they need to learn their body. You know, we're told as women you have a cycle every 28 days. And you would think that you're going to ovulate day 14, and so that may not be the case. Some women have a 30, 32, 33 day cycle and may not ovulate to day 18. But they not getting pregnant because they was told day 14 and they stop after that, you know. So it may just be a matter of education. It may be, I'll say, let's look into adoption if that's okay with you. What types of other mothering, what other roles can you take on that'll help you fulfill that? And sometimes it may be none of that, and we just have to experience the grief and the loss of that fertility and that ability to be a biological or a physical mother. And a lot of times that's what it is. We have to mourn that loss, and it's a constant loss because it's in your face every day, all day.
And so for anybody who is definitely battling with infertility, there are a number of options. Definitely be open and kind of help yourself by working through the grief one day at a time. And I know we talked about infertility, but one thing that I also wanted to talk to you about was birth trauma. Because that's something that, one, I never heard of. Because, you know, we're fighting so hard to have this child, and you don't really put the two words together. How can birthing something be so traumatic, especially if it's something that you look forward to for like the majority of your life?
Absolutely. So birth trauma, you know, as clinicians, we know trauma is, like we say, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. Trauma is in the individual's experience. What's traumatic to you may not be traumatic to me. So if my client comes and tells me this was extremely traumatic, then it was traumatic. And so I, as a clinician, typically operate from a trauma lens anyway. A lot of times stuff comes in my door, I'm looking at it from a trauma lens. A lot of our behaviors and actions and reactions are from traumatic experiences, right? So birth trauma can look like I was, you know, planning a natural birth or a water birth or something like that, and my labor stalled and I was rushed to the hospital and had to have an emergency C-section. And it was barely enough time for the medicine to kick in. Or I was planning this and I had, you know, the epidural didn't work. I still had a vaginal birth, but I felt everything. I felt myself tearing, or the doctors had, because I've literally seen videos, so I'm not, you know, and had talked to personal experiences where this baby was yanked from me. Or where I've seen, you know, you better push now or I'm just gonna cut you and get this baby out. That's traumatic, right? Birth trauma can also look like I've had a very healthy, very easy, very smooth pregnancy, and all of a sudden my water broke at 30 weeks. And now they're telling me they can't stop my labor, my baby is getting ready to be born, and it's only weighing maybe a pound, less than 2 pounds, and is in NICU. It can look like you went into labor at 26 weeks. 24 weeks is usually viability, where doctors will intervene. And so even with the experience of infertility or whatever, you are still trying to like, okay, let me get to this week, so let me get to that week, and let me get to this week, so let me get to that week, and let me get to 24 weeks, and let me get to 25 weeks, and 26, and 28, you know, all of this. So you are traumatized because you can't enjoy this pregnancy if you're always fearful. And you finally get there, or maybe the baby comes out and you don't hear that instant cry, or they're saying something's going on. So birth trauma can take many different roles, and again, it's in the person's individual experience. or even, you know, how the medical facilities may have talked to you or treated you during that time. Unfortunately, research has shown, and there's even been studies where doctors have said, you know, they feel like Black people and Black women have a higher pain tolerance, and so they're not given or listened to as regularly when they may say they're in pain, or not given medicines to help with that, or certain medicines. And so they're experiencing a lot of pain in general, but a lot of times in birth, or I'm, you know, gonna wait till I come to your room, or things like this. Now again, this doesn't happen in all situations. I don't want folks like freaking out and thinking that, but a lot of times it does happen. Unfortunately, it happens more than it needs to happen. So birth trauma can take on many different forms. I'm actually working with several clients who have experienced some birth trauma, infertility, and unfortunately and sadly infant loss or perinatal loss.
Right. And I think that's so important when you said the trauma lens, because I'm really big on trauma-informed care. And it's just so important, because when you have a client that comes in, most of the time they're not even going to want to address it. They're trying to, particularly us within within the Black community, we really don't want to focus on the stuff that we've kind of pushed to the side. We really want,
because you don't have time to, you got to keep going.
Exactly. Right. Right. And so I really appreciate the work that you do.
Thank you.
And I think it's just simply astounding.
Thank you. But you're right, or we don't even realize that it's trauma.
Right.
We've just been going, and it's not that we don't want to work on it, we didn't even know it was traumatic, or that we are having a trauma response. So yeah. Right.
And it comes with education, knowing your triggers, and knowing what trauma is, or learning what trauma is. And you know, that's something that we just have to do better as a community when we're working in the therapeutic process.
Absolutely.
And so to go back to your research, I know you just recently successfully defended y'all, your dissertation. What advice can you give to the clinician who really wants to pursue their EDD or pursue their doctoral degree?
Absolutely. You know, if you can do it, do it. Understand, this is a journey. I don't even still know how to explain what happened. Like, I know I'm Dr. Kristy Christopher Holloway right now, but I remember one day saying, what happened? Like, how did all this happen? You know, so, and it's crazy because we had been trying to get pregnant for a long time, like 3 years, and I, you know, enrolled in my program, and then several months later, they're like, you pregnant, your test is positive. And I'm like, well, if I'd have known that's all it took, I'd have been gotten, you know, re-enrolled in school, you know. But it took way more than that or whatever. And that's the thing, don't tell people that are experiencing infertility to just relax, right, or take their minds off it. Do not. Okay, if you don't take anything else from this, don't start with all that. But anywho, so the advice that I would give, you know, if you can do it, do it, but be prepared for the journey that you are about to go on. Have a support system. Engage in your support system if you can, but also, you know, understand that you know, if you're used to hanging out, or if you're used to doing certain things, that's gonna have to go on the back burner for a while. I missed almost 4 years of sorority meetings, you know, because I either had class, or I had new babies, I have twins, or I was doing research or work or papers, you know. So, you know, a lot of things will change. Relationships may suffer. Some friendships and interpersonal relationships. Those folks who love you and understand will be there when you finish, right? But, you know, there were plenty of times I couldn't hang out, or we had a girls' weekend, you know, last summer, or I guess this summer that just passed, and I was like, how has it been that we hadn't, you know, really gotten together like for a weekend in this long? They were like, you do know you were in school, and you know, things like that. So I'm tearing up because I'm like, oh my gosh, my relationships, you know. But, you know, have a support system. For me, what really was helpful, I literally prioritized everything. Like, everything had its place, and it was on my calendar. So if it was read this article, see clients, take a nap, shower at this time, eat. I have twins, so do this, because everything was literally on there, because I couldn't afford to forget to do something or miss something. So if you are that list person, that type A person, write it down. Have a support system, and really just understand that the journey that you're getting ready to go on, and the next 3 to 5 to 6 years of your life will be consumed with that. But I always focused on the big picture, and so I was like, what do I want in the end? To be Dr. Holloway. So that's what drove me through the whole time. And sometimes that's what we have to do. We have to focus on the end and the big picture to help us get through what we're going through.
Yes, definitely. It's so funny that you say that, because even when I did my master's program, I went on a brunch with my homegirl that I did the program with, and she was telling me how her relationships kind of suffered a little bit. And I was like, dang, even on like a master's level, that's so crazy, because a lot of people don't really understand what it's like to be in grad school.
Absolutely. And trying to be a lot of times, because we're non-traditional students a lot now, so you may be, as I say, super grown. I got super bills, right?
Bills.
I ain't just sitting down. I got bills. So a lot of us are still working. You may be a parent, you may be a spouse, you're a daughter, like you're a friend, you're a business owner. Like I was owning my business at this time and running that. I had 2 locations and kids and a wife and school, and so people don't realize you still got all of these other things. And that's why I say it's very important to prioritize, and it's also okay if things fall by the wayside. You're juggling all these balls. If one falls, that doesn't mean that you weren't successful or you failed. It just means it failed. The ball failed. Go back to the drawing board, pick it up, and figure out what you need to do, or if it's a task that you can delegate to someone else, which is why I keep saying a support system is extremely important. My husband was my major support system. In-laws were, friends who would come and watch the boys, nanny, like everybody was super supportive, and it was needed. And so no one was, in the beginning, I think people were like, man, you can't come do this, or can we do that, or you gonna sit up and watch TV? No, I gotta go read this article. I have to write this paper. Right. So and people, like I said, will get it and understand, but just be prepared for the journey. It's an amazing journey. I would not trade my experience for anything, but I am glad that it is over. It is done.
And how was that process, being a new mom and then completing your dissertation?
So, I was pregnant when I was in school. So folks who know my boys, they always joke because I call them old men.
Because they've been listening to articles.
Yeah, but they've been scholars since literally in the womb. When they were little peanuts in the womb. We were all at school, right? But it was hard sometimes, honestly, because there were times that I did want to do certain things, or I'm like, okay, mommy's got to go work on my dissertation, or mommy needs to do this real quick, and I'll come back. And it was to the point where my kids would be like, I'm working on my dissertation, and they had their little laptop Fisher Price thing, and I'm like, look at you. And I'm like, part of me is like, shout out my kids 2.5 and say dissertation, and then the other part is like, that means they hear me say that a lot. So what would I prefer to hear them say?
Yeah.
Right? So, but I did have to really be structured with the time with my husband, for myself, with my kids. And sometimes I wasn't always as it needed to be, or as much as I wanted it to be. But everybody that knows me knows family is priority and first, and my kids are going to be first before anything. So that's again why I made sure that everything was on my calendar and things, because when it was family time, my boys' time, my husband's time, then that's what it was. So but the process of working on it with kids, it was difficult, but again, I had a support system.
Right.
But there were plenty of times I'd be up till 3, 4 in the morning, and then kids, because that's what they do, they wake up in the middle of the night, and so as soon as I'm laying down, they're getting up. But there were also times where I'm like, you know what, it's 10 o'clock and I'm going to bed,
right? Or
I'm gonna be with my kids. Fridays is a day I don't do anything other than my boys. So no work, no clients, no, things like that. And so they always know this is me and mommy time. This is me and mommy day, the weekends. So it was difficult, but it was doable.
Good. And the reason why I asked you about your journey is because I know there's a lot of mothers out there who are looking to go back to school, or a lot of women who are kind of battling with, on one end, the superwoman syndrome.
Yes.
And they're trying to find a sense.
research on that to present on that.
And they're trying to find a sense of balance. And so I'm really big on representation, like how we talked about Michelle Obama and Gabrielle Union. It's always good to see somebody or hear somebody else's story that we feel like we can relate to.
Right.
So thank you so much for sharing.
Absolutely. And let me just say this, because I do present on the strong black woman syndrome and superwoman thing. Remember, superwoman was not real. And so we're trying to live up to this fable, this myth. We ain't gonna do it, right? You can be strong, but you don't have to be strong all the time, right? In a moment of weakness, it may not necessarily be weak. It takes a lot of strength to recognize that I'm in a moment of vulnerability. Right? Yes. So it's about how we frame the words. If you see weakness as this horrible word and I can't be weak, versus weakness as, hey, at this moment I don't have all of my strength, and this is what I need, right? So we're not going to be strong all the time, and we're killing ourselves trying to live up to that, right? And I'm firsthand experience, like I know this. So we have to remember Superman, Superwoman, all of this. Even sometimes when we say black girl magic, right? Like we can hold on to that. And I'm not saying don't say these terms, but magic is all about illusion, right? Magic is about what we think we see and what has happened. It's not real, right? So yes, we are magical. We got our powers and what we do, but don't let that be your sole narrative that I have to be this strong black woman, or I have to do all this to show all of, sprinkle this magic, you know. Don't let that be your sole narrative, right? But you can, you know, and again, go at your journey. If you are a new mom or an older mom, teenagers, you know, you can do it. It just may mean that your path and your program maybe take 6 years versus someone who did it in 4. Right. At the end of the day, what do you want? Then set your goal to get there. A lot of schools give you 7 to 10 years to complete it. So you got 7 to 10 years. You don't have to do it through year 3 or 4, you know. If you can, great. If you cannot, that's okay too. Definitely explore your options. There's always a program out there for you, especially if you're a non-traditional student. There are a lot of schools that are catering to the non-traditional student. Trust me, when I was in grad school, I was considered a non-traditional student. I was like, I gotta get this check. We're chilling. Big bills, grown bills, and responsibilities. The online programs. So yeah, a lot.
So thank you so much, Dr. Holloway. Can you please let the people know where they can find you, where you're located, things of that nature. So you can find me at New Vision Counseling Center. It's here in Douglasville, Georgia. So the metro area, because you know Douglasville is expanded. It used to be the country. It's all types of stuff out here. There's construction. We got I know, right? We big time in it. But newvisioncounselingcenter.com. Also on Facebook. At New Vision Counseling, and stay tuned, because if you follow me on there, you will see some other exciting news that will come out in the new year. So yeah, and with other ways that you can find me and follow me and have access to me. Yes, definitely, and I'll provide all of her information in the description box below. Definitely stay connected via Legacy SPKS on everything, and thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Legacy Speaks. Yay! Bye! Hey Legacy Squad, guess what? We have merch. So I need you to head over to the description box below and check out the new website.